Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. We hope you enjoy this evening's edition.
This is my third book of poetry, but my first using poems as a vehicle to reenact social and historical events. I am an OT, as Jim shared with you, so I do believe in strong public health and environments that nourish people and where workers and people do thrive. I do hope the backstory of the book reflects that belief in strong public health. And as I was writing the book, I kept being so surprised by Rhode Island's leadership a century ago in the brand new, at the time, public health movement. Indeed, Rhode Island helped to set the table for public health 100 years ago. And I care a lot that nationally, federally, there seems to be no place at the table now for public health, along with disease surveillance, water quality surveillance, climate science, worker protections being squeezed out. So I do hope that we can use some of the lessons from history and hindsight for foresight as we move forward and respond to new challenges. Because the past never really is the past, right? It's history repeats itself. I do want to thank Patrick T. Connolly, the historian laureate of the state, for lending a beautiful foreword to the book. And he wryly comments that Kissing the Shuttle, the unusual title, does not refer to, he writes, Kissing the Shuttle was not an act of love for the loom, or an expression of love for the loom. Damn right. What it is the common method that weavers used in the textile mills to, thank you. It was a common method that weavers used which spread contagious diseases, including tuberculosis. Although it had been known for decades that germs transmitted disease, and that TB was contagious, it was still in wide use. So this is a suction shuttle or a kissing shuttle. He's an engineer. You could be a weaver. So what the weaver would do is take refill the shuttle, hold that up a bit, so yeah, refill the shuttle with the bobbin of thread, then pull the end of the thread forward toward the tip of the shuttle. And here it is. Place her lips over the side, over the eye.
And suck the thread through this hole, which has a ceramic sleeve on it, too, so the thread has a
and suck the thread through. And share the shuttles.
So you see, this doesn't hold a lot of thread, so all day long, as the shuttle runs out of thread, they keep replacing the bobbin and sucking a new thread.
So if you were this weaver, whoops, you pass that around so people can see. Yeah. If you were this weaver and you harbored tuberculosis, whether you knew it or not, you may infect the entire weaving room. So this was a very common practice in textile mills everywhere until about 1911. But I discovered that not first, but actually second, as I was doing research for the book. What led me to write the book was a need and a photograph. And let me explain. A photograph leapt off the page of an illustrated history book of Pawtucket several years ago. You pass that around, Doris. That's great. Thanks. it leapt off the page of a book I was going through while I was clearing out my parents' house in Salesville after they had died. And my own compass was spinning, and I really needed terra firma. This photo found me. It's 1910. It's a photograph of, I had never heard of this before, a fresh air school or an open air school. Right here on Summit Street in Pawtucket, right near what I'll always know as the Memorial Hospital. I saw these kids, and I wanted to take hold, I connected with their vulnerability, because I was feeling that way. I connected with their vulnerability, but also the very, very cheerful expression on their face. I think I have another one to pass around. Oh, this is on the rear cover of the book also. So I couldn't get them out of my mind, and I just really wanted to borrow that resilience I saw in their faces and their cheer. And I also wanted them to feel warm and trace their story from healing, from being ill and frail kids with TB to whole and healthy. So the photo became, I guess I would say, a window through which I imagined a poem, writing a poem. And that turned into 2 and turned into 4. And figuratively speaking, those poems became like a palette, and the palette became a raft that I set out in to explore this region, this river in the valley that I was in, the home I was leaving. It was my childhood home. So that really helped me sort of say goodbye as I was leaving here, the area. Take the analogy a little further, every bend of the river I went around on my raft in this journey of research and imagining these kids' lives and learning about what society was like at the time here in Rhode Island in the height of approaching the height of the TB epidemic. I kept getting proud. I kept feeling prouder and prouder at the stories I found around each bend, in each cove, because in them, in the stories, and they were different. There are different threads in the book that weave through, but all of them had one thing in common, and that was Rhode Island's leadership and surprising innovations at this time, a very difficult time in the country, which in ways that benefited kids and workers and really speak to how important public health was in those days. So the book itself weaves original poems, my own, with archival photos that are really pretty timeless, many from Lewis Hines, the labor photographer. It weaves historical facts and footnotes, and also fictional characters, and those few characters are a composite of my ancestors who hail from Pawtucket, at least the first generation, and prior to that from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Quebec. So I hope it's a composite of them as well as their tenements where they grew up. And I hope the book conjures life in the Blackstone Valley and also the rhythms of the time. Through this weave of this hybrid weave that the book is in the 19th through the turn of the 20th century, mostly around the turn of the 20th century. There's darkness and there's light in it, for sure. At the time, we were a terrified nation. During the 19th and early 20th century, TB was the leading cause of death both in the world and in Rhode Island, and it was one of the most feared diseases. But again, just to restate, there was an unwavering solidarity in the country in a quest to stamp out TB. it was actually patriotic to join TB relief work, buy Christmas seals, hang positivity posters in the workplace, open the door to the relief workers who passed out 30,000 brochures in Rhode Island to households with tips for prevention, for hygiene, because this was called the hygienics movement as well, even including ways to right and wrong ways to sweep your floor. So it was really a far-reaching effort. It's inspiring to think of a time when the compassionate response is the patriotic response. It's like brilliant, right? Brilliant. So, and Rhode Island was a beacon. It really was. So there is a wonderful DVD by G. Wayne Miller produced. It's a film by G. Wayne Miller and David Betancourt. You may have heard it. It's titled On the Lake, Life and Love in a Distant Place. And the epigraph on this, the back of this documentary film about Wallam Lake, the state sanatorium for tuberculosis, and the people's lives and relationships there. The epigraph on the back is this: in a time of epidemic, the human spirit prevails. I'd like to read a short excerpt from the introduction to the book. Everyone knew someone who had TB. By 1905, TB killed 1 in 7 people in Europe and the Americas. Here in the Northeast, unsanitary, crowded mill and mill housing conditions contributed to contagion. Immigrants were twice as likely to die. In Pawtucket, bold reforms were underway, targeting workplace conditions like ventilation, practices like infection control, and child labor laws. By 1910, an estimated 1/4 of urban children were infected. The co-founders of the Providence League for the Suppression of TB, named Doctors Ellen A. Stone and Mary S. Packard, and Dr. Stone was also the medical director of schools, they launched the nation's first open-air classrooms for frail children to give them the opportunity for schooling and treatment in the open air instead of quarantine. Initially proposed to educate 10 students in renovated horse sheds at the Friends Meeting House in Providence, one began in what is now the Providence Preservation Society building, and another a stone's throw from here, next to the Memorial Hospital on Summit Street. Public school practices a nation now takes for granted got their start here. The model quickly spread through the country, establishing, among other things, the first school hot lunch program and formal outdoor recess. By the early 20s, these schools were in over 150 American cities. Several poems are set in these schools. Others follow a resilient child through her day in the state consumptive sanatorium, commonly known as Wallam Lake. The poems travel between the valley and the lake, the schools, the mills, and the sanatorium. I'd like to begin by setting the scene. The mill bell and the clothesline. No one out of earshot or reach. No matter how bone-tired, how deep asleep, in the dark, all wake, summoned by the bell that patterns the lives that swing between its call on Monday and the end of the Saturday shift, to make the cloth, the calico. No one out of earshot or reach of its long, slow clang. Oh, calico, calico, calico. No matter how bone-tired, how deep asleep, inside the rain-gray triple-deckers, all wake to the bell that echoes the country's craving for cloth. Hungry for calico, the latest patterns, the prettiest, the best, from Pawtucket and Central Falls. All the three-deckers built to last, house workers flooding in to a hungry country, its many-tongued neighborhoods and old-world smells. Meat pies heavily cloved to disguise what may have spoiled inside. Cook sweat clings to horsehair plaster walls. Chemistry of onion, cabbage, turnip fills stairwells, wafts onto tenement porches where clotheslines crisscross, sagging with shirts that never dry. The same blue shirts that cling damp to the backs of the laborers. A blue-gray line reaching to dawn. Another, I would say, landscape poem. No, I think I will actually instead save that. Let's go inside the mill. Kissing the shuttle. The toll it took to spin the thread, to weave the cloth, that spewed the lint, that choked the lungs, that made the young weavers, women and girls, most susceptible to illnesses that would fell them. White lung, brown lung, TB, influenza, contagions they spread. Weaving cotton, the air had to be moist. Windows closed tight, floors kept wet, pipes overhead steamed the air. Steaming the cotton and the girls, each tending 4 looms, refilling shuttles with fresh bobbins of thread. By kissing the shuttle, lips pressed against the shuttle's eye, then sharply inhaling to pull the thread through, sucking lint and toxins into their lungs. 300 times a day, they'd share the shuttles, reuse the shuttles, kiss the shuttles, mouths thick with the taste of what lodged in their lungs. Lint, fibers, dirt, a glue called size, and chemicals if the thread was dyed. They'd cough the dirt up and start again, and not only that, these girls with ruined lungs coughing up cotton, lips bruised, teeth coming loose, were just girls. So they'd share lipstick, reapply it, after all that kissing left behind in the weaving room. I'd like to make a remark about that. Weavers had the highest TB rate of all mill workers. A weaver that spent 10 years in the factory, of those weavers, half would not survive. Dr. Charles Chapin was a health officer for Rhode Island for 30 or 40 years. James will tell us what his tenure was, I think, but he was the first to connect TB with mill conditions and practices and led the campaign for reforms. It was in 1911 that Massachusetts was the first state to ban the suction or kissing shuttle, also called the kiss of death shuttle, mandating self-threading ones. I'd like to go to the Fresh Air School. The Fresh Air School, 1908, Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Out of congested tenements they come, anemic, underweight, frail ones, tubercular in the early sapping stage before the lesions. Not to sanatorium, but to school. The first hot school lunch in the land, a schoolyard romp every 20 minutes. Air as cure, air as elixir, for lungs unused to the appetite for it. For 20 children, once thought beyond aid or learning, the sense of belonging is as warm as the soup they sip this morning between art and first recess. Schooled into a generous life, a happy picture. A remark about that. There were 2 other heroes besides Dr. Charles Chapin. Their names were, I've mentioned them earlier, Dr. Ellen Stone and Dr. Mary Packard. In the first decade of the 20th century, an estimated 1/4 of urban children were infected, and these doctors opened the nation's first schools. The model quickly spread with the motto, double rations of air, double rations of food, half rations of work. Double rations of air, double rations of food, half rations of work. Tall windows with muslin screens open wide to autumn sleet. On a pot-bellied stove, mittens and bright paintings dry. 20 pupils, bundled up, sit inside their Eskimo bag. Warm drawstring sack, little woolen helmet, a hot stone for their feet beneath each desk. They breathe their lessons in, and the world offers itself. Spiral of scrubbed blue days, moving clouds and changing light, sheets of rain swishing in on the wind. Roar of the falls, Slater's red mill, gust and whir of the water wheel, ever revolving, churning mist and rainbows. Explorers on the verge, learning wilderness skills at every turn. I have an article for you at the book table. There's about 15 copies, written by Ellen Stone in 1908, really describing in a lovely way, very detailed way, the first fresh air classroom. Please take one. In 1907, the first task of the Anti-TB League here was to print positivity posters, and these were hung in every factory. They had bold font, bold images, and were very large. I'm going to read a selection of them, and now and maybe a little later. Positivity poster in the lunchroom. Dirt and germs are the bosom friends of sickness. Let's show them the door. Positivity poster in the ladies' dormitory. The American Red Cross says, try Kleenex. Ladies, fold your handkerchiefs away. Kleenex is cleaner, tidier. Your first defense. New scientific discovery. Germ spread disease. Gents, rid yourself of beard germs. Shave your whiskers. Ladies, raise your skirt hems out of the dirt. Let's defeat germs. TB's gifts. Shorter skirts, better razors. Hot school lunch and formal recess. Kleenex. Christmas seals. Positivity posters in the workplace. Labor laws and shorter hours. Anti-spitting laws. Borden's condensed milk. Public health campaigns and Dixie cups. Training for all in the proper way of brushing teeth. And for children, how to live as orphans in other people's houses. Some words about TB, briefly. TB is caused by exposure to tubercle bacilli bacteria in infected sputum or other expectorants. Remember anti-spitting law? Another possible cause, especially among infants and kids, was consuming contaminated milk. Rhode Island passed one of the first laws in the country which mandated TB control, which was inspecting cattle that were suspected to harbor the bacteria and quarantine them. In 1920, 5 of 7 samples of baby's milk collected in Providence was contaminated with the bacteria, and less than 60% of the Providence milk supply was pasteurized. A section of the book is in the voice and and of Aggie, an industrious 8-year-old girl. And we follow her from home into the sanatorium and then back to her grandmother's house. So I thought it's hard to arrange a reading by dipping into the different places in the book, but I thought that is the best way to give an overview. I do want to read a couple of the Aggie poems. Again, a fictitious composite of my ancestors. Let me tell you about her, the relationships here. Aggie is Aggie. Ellen is her mom. Joseph is her dad, who has just succumbed to TB, leaving the family with newborn twins. Noon whistle. The men eat meat pies beneath the elms, smile and wave to Ellen walking by. One whispers, she'll marry again with twins to feed. They miss Joseph and notice his widow's hemline rising as she climbs the hill to the fresh air school and her new job as girls' lavatory matron. Her husband, their friend, 3 months dead of consumption, then newborns. Her 8-year-old, Aggie, sweet kid, in the sand, too, caught a cold that flew to her lungs, got infected, caring for her daddy. The Mill families in parish will give what they can, send prayers her way and bingo money. When Joseph passed, the priest brought the news and still visits every week for comfort. He was helping Aggie prepare for her first communion. God willing, she's out by June.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week, Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.